right, everyone. Thanks for joining another episode of the Terrence Williamson Author Podcast. I think I think this is number 7. Uh, I keep losing track.
That's okay.
We have Tara Osipov with us. She's the vice president of Ivana. So I thought I'd bring her on today and just have a quick chat. So I guess first off, Tara, how you doing?
Doing really good. Yeah, changing of the season, moving into fall, which is my favorite time of year. So
Oh yeah,
good. Yeah.
yeah. Sweater weather is my favorite.
Yeah, me too.
Um, so you recently became the vice president, is that right?
Yes, yes. I recently took this job with Ivana about
Hmm.
4.5 months ago, I'd say.
Oh, okay. And how you liking it so far?
Good. It's really great. It's a very big change from what I'm used to. Processing a whole new industry, navigating a completely new job than I've had from the last 7 years. So lots of
Hmm.
changes. Overall, super grateful, and I'm really liking it and enjoying it.
Yeah, good. Now you had what was it before? Something creative, right?
Aiding creative.
Aiding creative. Yeah. And what were you doing there? Sorry.
So I was the owner and CEO of Aiden
Hmm.
Creative. So it was a marketing firm, and we were in business for just under 7 years.
Hmm. That's interesting. You've got quite the entrepreneurial spirit behind you, don't you?
Yeah, for sure. I really enjoyed owning my own business, and I think that's what makes this job I wouldn't say easy for me, but definitely easier to navigate, I guess, because in my role as the vice president, you have to have that entrepreneurial spirit, because I'm, helping run at least the internal part of the company. And so there's a lot of things that spill over from my last role into this role for sure.
Hmm. Perfect. Did you go to school like SAST or anything like that? Or is it SAS Polytechnic now, I guess?
No, I went to school, in Vancouver.
Oh.
Well, I went to U of R. I'm actually back in U of R again.
Hmm.
I think I'm gonna be a lifelong learner probably. And then I went to U of A, and then I went to a school in Vancouver as well. So I've kind of jumped around. I took fashion marketing in Vancouver, but prior to that, I was in school at University of Regina and U of A.
Nice. How did you like Vancouver?
Um, you know, I went into it, I romanticized it a lot before I was there. I
Hmm.
thought it was gonna be a lot different than it was. I'd never been before I moved, so I didn't, like, visit prior to moving, I just went. And,
Hmm.
um, it's it's too big of a city for me, although I lived 2 blocks from the ocean, which was super nice, and I really liked the fresh markets that you could walk to. I thought that was really great. However, I just found that, I missed, like, the smaller community sense, and it's just so big, and there's so many people that I don't think it's something that I would want to where I'd wanna live long term, but I really enjoyed my time there for just under 3 years.
Yeah. Yeah, my brother lives in Vancouver, so we go visit him often. I'm going out this weekend too.
Nice.
And yeah, it's a good place to visit, but to live there, I don't know, I couldn't do it.
I love visiting, and the prices are crazy there. Cost of living is so high, rent is so high. I lived in a one-bedroom, I think it was, like, I wanna say, like, maybe 400 square feet, and I was paying, like, $1,600 a month. It was
Wow.
crazy. And this is, yeah, 7.5 years ago. So, I
Yeah.
can't think what that costs now.
Well, I got a couple friends, they're sharing a one bedroom, and I think they're paying about 2,000 a month.
Oh,
And
yeah, that makes sense. Well, in my one bedroom, I did share the rent, my space with someone else, so it did make
hmm,
it a little bit more tolerable. I was a student, and I couldn't afford to pay that all on my own,
hmm.
and so it did help out to have a roommate for sure, but it's hard when you're in a one-bedroom, you know, suite, and you have a roommate. So
Yeah, exactly. Well, my brother was saying because he did Vancouver, not film school, is game design school. I can't
okay,
remember the actual name of it. I think it's associated with the film school. But anyways, he was saying that some of his classmates there were sharing a one bedroom and they just had a curtain. There's
yeah.
4 people in one room with curtains drawn between. That's their little.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that happens a lot more often, with the smaller places just because how can people who are in school, afford the rent there? And then you've gotta afford to live on top of that, so it's just not manageable.
exactly,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
Um, yeah, I saw your Facebook post the other day, or maybe it's a story. I actually kind of thought it was inspiring because you had a birthday not too long ago, right?
Yes, yes, my birthday was just on the 2nd of September.
Yeah. Um, happy belated.
Thank you, thanks.
Um, but you're kind of posting about how, uh, y- I guess it's not necessarily journaling, but kind of some goals that you had for the future and stuff like that. And I thought it was quite neat. I kind of wanted to,
Thanks.
think about doing that myself. Um, because journaling is something I think it's a forgotten art.
For sure, yeah.
Um, do you do a lot of journaling, or is that kind of like just something you do on your birthdays, or?
No, I journal at least a few times a week, and
Mm,
I started doing that, um, probably 2007, 2008. I
mm,
dealt with, like, a significant loss in my life, and it just allowed me to, like, navigate that better and, like, get some emotions and things that were going on in my head out.
mm,
And sometimes it helps just to write things on paper, and in one respect, you look at that and think like, "Oh, wow, that thought is, like, so crazy, and it's not realistic or logical at all." And the other sense, it's good to get things on paper like your goals, which may not also be logical, but it allows you to rationalize them. So, no matter what, you're able to rationalize the things going on in your head more when you see them on paper, or at least I think you can.
mm,
So, writing, on my birthday was not something out of the ordinary. I just was thinking more about and writing about, the constructs of time and what that all
mm.
means.
That's very interesting. Are you okay if I ask about the
Yeah,
significant loss, or you?
absolutely. Yep.
Sure.
Yeah.
What happened, if you don't mind?
Yeah, sure. So I lost my brother in
Mm,
2007. He and I were really close. We were only 18 months apart, and he suffered from a burst aorta in his heart. So we
oh,
didn't know that he was sick and or that anything was going on. And so we one day he just went to work and he died. And
mm,
so it was a very significant life-changing event, as they call it. For me, and it changed my entire life. And from there, um, I could like to say I was standing on a carpet and it got ripped from under me, and
yeah.
the ground underneath it was like super unfamiliar, and I didn't know anything about it. So I had to like re-navigate my whole life, relearn because everything that I envisioned in my life involved him. And
Mhm,
so, everything from like nieces and nephews I may have, or from, taking care of my parents when they got older, or I spent a lot of my time with him. I'd say he was one of my best friends. And so I had to
mhm,
like, learn a life without him. And I only knew a life with him because he was my older brother.
mhm,
And it's gonna be crazy to say this, and I think a lot of people will think this, but first I'll give a little context before I say it. I did go through grief counseling or bereavement counseling, and I went through it a few times until the point where I actually started to um, be a facilitator in the group, which was really rewarding for me until I was ready to let that go. But
mhm,
I actually feel like his life was a gift and in his death was a gift
mhm,
because it allowed me to, and I'm really grateful for that. And I thank him so much for what he gave me in his death because he gave me just as much as he love and learning as he did in his life. Because through his passing, I learned so much about myself and life on this earth and what it means to like be here. I figured out what my life purpose was or what I think it is. I learned about, the person I want to be. And it wasn't an easy journey at all. Like I will say it was one of the hardest for sure times of my entire life.
mhm,
If not the hardest. And I just turned into a different person, and that's unfortunately not everybody's grief story, and I recognize that. I did a ton of work. I was just at my therapist last week, and I was chatting with her. I've probably been to my therapist hundreds of times since then, and taken up meditation and things for myself to really grow because it's a really tough thing to go through.
mhm. That is that's beautiful and profound and tragic. And
Mhm.
I appreciate you sharing that. But it is so true. How old was he when he passed?
He was 22 and I was
22.
21, so he was really young in my
Yeah,
eyes, I think so.
that is, yeah. Um, yeah, like when our son passed, I found that journaling, like I wrote a book for him,
Yes,
and
that's right.
that was really profound as well, because just like you said, you kind of are able to rationalize a bit better. Um, and I've kind of kept that up. And just like you said, like there's my wife said, because like I've kept writing ever since. And she said, that's the gift that he's given you, because when I
Mhm.
write, even though I'm not directly writing about him or anything like that, he's always in there.
For sure.
Because Mistress of Auschwitz, it has to do with a lot of suffering. And so I was able to draw upon what I know about suffering and kind of articulate some of the things that I was feeling, that I can't just say to someone, but I can write it.
Mhm.
You know.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, we definitely I find it's easier for me to write down my feelings or the things I'm thinking, and then to vocalize them. Um, that's a better path for me. I wanted to touch on something I heard you say. So I was reading this Facebook post this week of this woman from Saskatchewan actually who passed away. I think she's passed away now, but she wrote this at the end of August about her own death. She was dying.
Mm,
And she wrote something about suffering that I thought was so true. So she wrote like as human beings we fear suffering and there's like this beauty in suffering. And I actually think so too at this point. So December is when my brother died. He died on December 17th.
mm,
And the suffering that I feel in December and the grief I feel in December is actually like really beautiful process. And
mm,
I used to like try to mask it with other things. People and busy, 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 do this, make sure December is filled with stuff. And I
mm,
kind of like to sit in the grief because in the suffering of it, because um the fact that I hurt and is painful means to me that I loved him enough that it hurts, right? There's so
mm,
much I have so much love for him that it hurts so badly. And still to this day and after all of these years. And so I kind of welcome it. And I
mm,
think we have this interesting relationship with pain and suffering that we need to look at as humans and not think of it as so negative. We learn so much from pain.
mm. It's very true. Um, I don't meant to make too much of a religious spin on this, but
No.
like I am still religious.
Mhm.
So, I was talking about this the other day because I avoided church for a long time.
Mhm.
I
Like
was
after
pretty,
your son had passed or
yeah, exactly. I avoided church for a long time. Always found excuses not to go, because when I go to church is when I was faced with suffering. I'm facing, the God who,
yeah.
all that stuff, right?
Yeah, for
And there's something so phenomenal about it, because I decided maybe a few months ago that I start going regularly now, because facing the suffering is so much better than stuffing it down, because then it just multiplies,
for sure.
right? Because
Absolutely.
then if you don't face it, it just grows, and then you end up facing a much more potent suffering.
It comes out
um
in ways, right? Like, yeah,
mhm,
we think that if we just ignore suffering, it will go away, which is absolutely untrue. It just spreads. We need to look it in the face and deal with it. At least I believe that, and that's really healed me as like
mhm.
living in that pain and then releasing it when I was ready. But I
Yeah.
went through a similar thing too. I don't go back to church now, but I am a spiritual person who
Mhm,
believes in something greater, but for a long time, I was really angry with God or whatever it may be, just
mhm.
that, of course, because our loved one was taken, right?
Right, right. um do you still do any facilitating?
I don't. So I did for a few years, and the bereavement center is like one of the best things I did for my grief. And there were people in my group, so it was group sessions, and they broke. I was in like the young adults, so I think it was like 35 and under. And in my group, there's people who had lost their loved ones 10 years ago. There are people who had lost their loved ones. I had lost my brother a week before I started going. So it
Right.
was such a wide array of people in there. It was so interesting. And then I was able, once I went through the first time, I was like, okay, I need to go again. Like I need this group. And I did. I went again, and it was hard. Like every time I went, as I said, I think it was like a week in after my brother had passed, just after Christmas, that I
Mm,
started going, and it was so difficult. But I forced myself to keep going. And then I got a lot out of facilitating, helping others, and they had asked me because I had this like sort of way of working through grief that they thought was valuable. The woman there is amazing. Her name is Marlene,
mm,
incredible woman, but she allowed me to help facilitate the group. And it got to a point though that I didn't need it anymore. And not that
mm,
I didn't want to give back anymore, but I needed to let go for myself because I had done it for other people and I had done it for myself, but at one point I was like, "Okay, Tara, you don't need to put yourself through it anymore. It's okay." So I didn't do it for years, and then actually just pre-pandemic, I just looked into going back and facilitating again
mm,
because it's been probably 8 or 9 years or whatever it's been since I've been there, and so I think I'm ready to give back again, but I needed some time in between where I had to stop using it as a crutch to connect, to something
mm.
back to him. I needed to heal.
Yeah, that's very profound. It's it's hard to know when you're ready to let go of some of those things, and to take the next step and to heal, like you said, because sometimes it's so easy. And I think it's so profound listening to you because you're saying that, you take not maybe not enjoyment in the suffering, but sorry, beauty in the suffering,
Mhm.
and you're almost thankful in a way, almost.
Yeah.
Because it's so easy just to become bitter,
Oh,
and
yes.
no one would blame you either, right?
I saw a lot of people in the bereavement center who were very bitter and didn't and not that they didn't wanna let go, they just maybe didn't know how or didn't have the tools, and I don't know. We could get really deep into it, but I
Mm,
think there's so much stuff that should be taught to us in like, elementary school and school about how to cope and like meditation and journaling and like, self-improvement. There should be like a course taught from when you're in kindergarten on like personal growth and development because we'd be so much more equipped as human beings.
mm,
And I think I'm fortunate because I dug in deep into how to cope and find my way out of it. Um, and some people just don't have the tools. And
mm,
so it's really unfortunate, but that grief lives with them. And it kind of like, I look at grief in a way of it digs this hole inside of you. And you need to learn how to fill that hole with other things, in my mind. So, like, you need to fill it with like love of friends, family, memories of your loved one, passions, hobbies. You can't ever, in my mind, completely fill the hole because your person was in that hole. And so, or it carved that hole, the loss. But
right.
but some people just never learn how to fill it again in any way, right? And not that can ever completely be filled again, but it can to a capacity, or I think it can.
Mm,
And I feel sad because I think more people, not more, anybody who's still suffering grief with grief deserves tools and mechanisms to find their way out and to fill
mhm.
that space with the beauty of life because no one's loved one would want them to continue suffering. They would want them to, to live happily.
Exactly. It's very true. Yeah, I think, I think I created my own hell for a lot of years,
Sure.
right? By being so bitter, being so angry. Um, because I went to a grief counselor. She's a
Mhm.
very sweet person. But I think that she gave me some bad advice.
Okay.
Um, and what she mentioned to me, because I was very angry. And
Mhm.
so I get very upset. Like at the end of the day, when I came home from work or anything like that, I'd be very upset. I'd be very angry. And so I didn't like being angry around my wife or my daughter or anything like that. It's not a very pleasant environment,
Yep.
being so angry and bitter. And so she mentioned for me to just find a private place because what I do when I get pretty physical when I'm
Yep.
angry, not with my
Yep.
wife or my daughter, but like I'll
Yeah.
punch a wall or something, right?
Yep.
And um, yeah, it's just not a pleasant thing to environment. So what she mentioned was to find a safe spot and to take like a wet rag and throw it against the wall. And I think for maybe some people that would work, but I think what it caused for me is it allowed because anger is kind of like it's super addictive, right?
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so when you feed that addiction, you end up just snapping right to anger, right? So I think what I did was create this angry monster,
Yeah.
and so you know I kind of snapped to anger first, and it's taken me a long time to get away from that. Um, but yeah.
Did you ever Yeah, I agree. I think you're just kind of feeding it potentially. Have you
Hmm.
ever tried, meditation?
It's different sorts of meditation, not meditation where I clear my mind, but
Okay.
I'll do some sort of meditation where I focus on something.
Okay.
Um, Writing for one is a really good thing for meditation for me because it's not clearing the mind, but it's more just because when you write or do something different or creative, you're using a part of your brain that honestly pretty much lies dormant.
Yeah,
And when you're able to kind of get it's kind of weird once you get into a good routine of doing it, you can actually almost feel it, right? You
for
can
sure.
almost feel like your thoughts coming from a different part. And so when I do that, it's kind of like letting the rest of me kind of rest.
Yeah, yeah,
And
sure.
then so you kind of dive into this little world, and that's all it's there, that's all that exists. You kind of, you know, playing out this fiction in your mind and on the page. So that's the kind of meditation I do. I haven't actually tried um breathing meditation or any other sorts, but
I highly
maybe.
recommend it if you're willing to try it. I honestly think meditation kinda, like, saved my life in a way. Um,
Yeah.
um, and it's funny because I thought too it was about, like, clearing your mind, but it's actually not at all. It's
Hmm.
about being able to, um control your thoughts more so. And there's like a f you could if you download something like Headspace or just I think Headspace is the best for beginners. It's made by
Hmm.
Google. They've got
Okay.
some trial things on Netflix actually that talk about it, but, it basically is like well, Google made it, so it's great in a sense that it's very user friendly and allows people to, like, take the small steps into meditation,
Hmm.
but, it really helps with anger
Hmm.
and sadness and happiness, and, it's helped me to do you know what the hedonic treadmill is?
No, no.
Okay, so the hedonic treadmill I'm gonna botch this sort of, but you'll be able to get the the concept. So the
Mm,
hedonic treadmill basically states that we all have this, like this, I guess, plateau or like this even keel of happiness that we sit at. And
mm,
then things that are sad happen and things that are happy happen, but we always level out back to our level of happiness, right? And it takes a lot of work to actually change that steady level of happiness. You have to invest like lots of work into raising that. Otherwise, even like tragic events or extremely happy events, you'll just eventually even out to like where you were. And
mm,
so for me, life is about like how do I work at little things that can, elevate my regular level of happiness, you
mm,
know? And so how can I raise my hedonic treadmill, I guess? And
mm,
meditation's like really big for that because I find like when something really exciting happens, I'm pretty chill about it, and I'm grateful for it, but when something really, like, sad happens, I'm pretty chill about it. I'm able to work through it. I manage stress really well, and I think, meditation has really helped me to be a more even, less reactive person no matter what happens, and I'm really grateful of that because it's definitely helped me with my grieving process. Um,
interesting.
yeah.
Yeah.
I was really angry too for a long time, so I get that.
Yeah. So hedonic then, is it kind of like the same root word as not like not hedonistic, but like the Greek I guess
That's
I
a
guess it
really
would
good
be
question. Let me
happy
think.
or pleasure. Um yeah, going back to your point about like how we should teach um coping and personal growth from very
Mhm.
early age.
Yeah.
And I think that why sometimes we suffer so much when something like this happens is because, like, for example, I was naive to the world of cancer. I was naive to the world of child loss. And you
Mhm.
can't really know what it is until you experience it. But um, the reason that the suffering and the trauma is so heavy is because you're naive to how malicious it is,
Mhm,
right?
mhm.
And I think that's a lot of what we go through life. We, the whole of society kind of suppresses suffering as
Yes.
well. And I think if before the suffering happens, if we can, you know, like from all philosophy, from Stoic philosophy to Christian philosophy to all philosophy, Buddhist philosophy, life is suffering. And so the different philosophies have their different ways of dealing with it. Like Stoic philosophy is not allowing external events to influence you.
Yeah.
That's, it's the really quick version of Stoicism. But
Yes, yes.
um, um, I guess Buddhism too would be a bit more like that as
Similar.
well, as more
Yeah,
finding the inner peace and stuff like that. And
yeah.
um, then Christian philosophy, same thing, finding peace with externally. Um, yeah, and I think yeah, so the base of life is suffering, is basically those philosophies. And I think if we have that understanding, even from an early age, that maybe when times like this do happen, not that it's going to hurt less or anything like that, but we might be able to readily cope with it.
Well, yeah, we don't teach kids coping mechanisms.
Mm.
Um, or we do in small ways, but we don't actually, like, label them as such. Kids watch by learning and seeing how we cope, but they don't necessarily be like, "This is how you cope with this," you know?
Mhm,
This when you're upset, you need to breathe or you need to write or, this is how we deal with this situation. And I think, like, for me, that's why I feel like there's just so much numbing, especially with, like, TV, alcohol, things like that, right? Um,
mhm,
TV may be, like, one of the worst ones too, like, instead of dealing with anything, you just put on the TV, and it consumes you, and we don't have to think about anything, we can just numb our minds, and
mhm,
we don't learn to just, like, really feel, and that it's okay to be angry, and that it's okay to be sad, or it's okay to be happy, and it's okay those emotions are okay, and you can live in them and sit in them and not have to numb them. It's like, I have a family member who is an alcoholic,
mhm,
and they never learned well, I went to Al-Anon when I was younger,
mhm,
and they said, like, "This person in your life," who's a close family member of mine, "never learned how to deal with emotions." So, basically, when they were happy, they would drink, when they were sad, they would drink. So now they're an adult, and they're very childlike in a lot of ways because they've never learned how to cope with anything, and
mhm,
I think alcohol is one, but there's also, like, TV and even sports. Like, there's a lot of things that we numb ourselves with instead of really just feeling and dealing with things. And, like, there's a lot of things that really hurt, and I learned if I'm ever going through something in my life, whether it's really happy or really sad, I don't allow myself to have alcohol.
mhm,
Um, I never, like, have a rule, like, you can't cope that way, or, like, I don't go sit in front of a TV if I'm feeling upset. I go sit by myself and think or write
mhm,
because I wanna process it, and
mhm.
kids, we don't equip them for that. It's just like, they're mad, it's like, "Well, go to your room," or whatever. I not to knock on people's parenting skills because everyone's different. But I just think that, we need to talk to our kids more and get them to realize that feelings are okay.
Mhm. Yeah, that's so true. I mean, like as a parent, sometimes when your child is upset or anything like that, it's really easy to say, "Okay, here, have some gummies or have a treat,
Yeah,
or here's your iPad," or anything like that, just to kind of,
alright.
life's busy, things might be happening that you can't deal with. But again, if you ignore the suffering or suppress it, it just multiplies later.
And that's a
So,
to interject there for a quick second, but just before you leave that topic, like, then we learn to associate things. So, like, let's say a child is sad and you're like, "Well, let's go for ice cream." Well, then they learn to cope with food. Or even if they're happy and you're like, "Let's have ice cream." They learn to cope with food. Or with whether it's with TV and it's like, "Well, you're upset, here's your iPad." Well, we learn to cope with TV, right? And so instead it's like, "Hey, you're happy, like, explain why you're happy. How does that make you feel? Or if you're sad, like, tell me about that sad feeling. Where do you feel it?" I think those things would be really great, healthy things to do with children or adults for that matter.
mhm.
It's just that if you teach them when they're young, they have a better chance of, like, developing healthier coping mechanisms. Sorry to
That's
cut you off there, but I just caught that one thing about you saying about, giving kids food and stuff, right?
No, I appreciate it. That's actually where I was going next, but you articulated it better than
Okay.
I could.
Sorry about that.
No, you could. Yeah, it like going to sports. It's so true because I remember I got into gambling because it's such a repression of
Yeah,
consciousness.
for
Because
sure.
you're not conscious, you're not thinking, you're just really just what's happening on this on the TV, what's happening on the sport is everything. And so
Yep,
gambling helped elevate that, right?
for
Uh,
sure.
I didn't have too much problem with booze, which is nice. Because I have a family member who passed away because of alcoholism as well.
Yep.
Um, and so I kind of saw how that affected family. So but as soon as my son passed, like for a good 6 months, a year, we didn't have anything.
Yeah.
Because they didn't want exactly didn't want to teach that coping, right? Whether it
Yeah,
was happy or sad, you don't want to teach that.
absolutely.
Um, and kind of sidetracking a bit
Yeah,
on booze. Um, I had a guy on a podcast yesterday. It was so interesting. This is why I really like doing this because I don't know if this podcast is ever going to go anywhere or anything like
yeah,
that. But I'm having conversation, like meaningful conversations with people that I would never have otherwise.
for sure.
And he was on yesterday, and he has a mental health podcast called You, Me, and BPD, which is bipolar disorder.
Okay.
And so he was talking a lot about the bacteria that's in your gut and how impactful it is on how you um, emotionally feel, how you behave, even.
Interesting.
And yeah, the science was really incredible behind
Oh,
it. 'Cause he was going into it. It's so profound. Because it's like when he's saying it, it's like, yeah, that's what's happening, right?
yeah. Yeah, food plays so big role for sure.
Because he's talking, because I was talking about alcohol, and I was saying, like, it's taken me so long to realize, but if I'll have booze, then the next day I'll have a very challenging mental day.
Oh,
I
for sure.
will be worried about so many different things, outlandish things that just don't like have no impact on me whatsoever.
Yes. Yeah, for sure.
And it took me so long to realize that because it's strange because it's the next day that it was affecting me. It wasn't the day that I was drinking because the day you're drinking kind of gives you a little bit of a high. I never get drunk really. I'll get a bit buzzed
Yeah.
and so the next day, like in the evening or whatever, then I'll really feel it. And so he was explaining how the alcohol will actually kill off, like when you give, when you want to kill bacteria, you use alcohol. Like that's how we do with alcohol wipes and all. You kill off the bacteria. So he says you kill off a lot of those bacteria and you kill off some of the B12 as well, which is responsible for like if B12 goes really low, then depression goes really high.
Okay, yep, that
So
makes sense.
it's quite neat to hear. But yeah,
Yeah, alcohol does nothing good for anybody, but,
mm,
um, I mean, I like it, but I know it's, it's a vice and it's, not good, and there's nothing that should be more regulated than, like, marijuana or anything else, even though I don't smoke marijuana, but,
mm,
I I know the, uh, negative effects of alcohol. I drink it.
mm,
I'm actually on a I do, like, 30 or 60 days of no alcohol at a time, like, at least
uh-huh,
once a year. Um, I just like to reset, kinda give my body a break, and I'm not, a person that drinks a ton, but I think it's good to, well, get that healthy bacteria back in your body, give your body a good reset, give your mind and, everything, a chance, a break at that, and it's just like sometimes I go through spurts of not having sugar and those types of things too.
mm,
Try to create a little balance in my life.
yeah, yeah. Um, Now to shift it a bit,
Yeah.
I heard that again, if you don't want to talk about this story, that's completely fine.
Oh, that's
We
okay.
can we can talk about plenty. Um, I heard that you had a very interesting travel story.
Yes. I was on a hijacked bus in Guatemala.
Wow.
Yeah. So, it's a really long story, so I won't get too far into it, but, held at gunpoint. Um, it would take, like, 20 minutes to tell, but I'll just give the Coles Notes of it.
Wow.
Essentially, my travel mate actually, my roommate that I was living with in Vancouver, she's from Regina too. Her and I just, like, it's funny, like, serendipitous, which is supposed to be a good thing, but that we ended up on this bus. We had run into some old people we had met traveling, and they were like, "Come back down to San Juan." And my friend and I were actually going to go to the Corn Islands and then go south. And we had already been south, but we were going to go deeper south. And we decided to go back to San Juan. And we had heard that 70 people or 72 people just got killed on a bus that day.
Wow.
But we thought, like, that can't happen to us. But we were still like, whoa, that's pretty scary. And we were on like a double decker bus that you would like a Greyhound type of bus.
Hmm.
And one second things seemed normal, and the next the cartel were on our bus. And the Canadian embassy had told us they were cartel afterwards, but like just held at gunpoint. Like at one point, one of the guys, the cartel, had his gun to my head, and he pulled the release back. And I was like, this is it for me. And it was really calm in that moment. And my travel mate, Katie, she was yelling. She was like, "Don't kill my friend! Don't kill my friend!" And we had known that people had been killed, and people get killed there a lot. Just we were 2 kilometers from the El Salvador border, which is like literally one of the most dangerous countries in the world. And I had this necklace on that had my brother's ashes in it.
Hmm.
I ripped it off my neck and took it. And I just thought to myself, like, oh my God, my parents are gonna like have to bring me home in a body bag. Like, what's gonna happen to my body? Like, how are they gonna get me home? Like, those
Hmm.
are the kind of thoughts were going through my head at the time. Luckily, something happened, and some things what happened, and they ended up letting us go.
Hmm.
Um, but we had like nothing. And there was 5 of us because we were with 2 people from England and then a friend from India. And we were sharing because they didn't have an embassy there and we did. We had a
Hmm.
Canadian embassy there in El Salvador. And we almost or we're not well, we'll get to that part in a second, but we decided to share a hotel with them because they didn't know, like, we had no money. So the Canadian embassy gave us $12 a day to live on because it's very like regulated of like what they think you can live on. And then at this time there was no e-transfers, right? Like that wasn't a thing. And we didn't
Right.
even have cell phones because like this was I would say 2008, 2009 maybe. And so you still had to have like SIM cards and stuff like that when you went into new countries. Yeah. And there was just iPhones were just coming out kind of thing, so or being more widely available. Anyway, so we had $12 a day between 5 people. And we were sharing this 2-bedroom room between the 5 of us. Luckily, we were able to get that,
Hmm.
and we didn't have like some of us didn't even have shoes because they'd just taken everything. So it was just wild. And that happened on a Saturday, and then we flew home on the Tuesday. The embassy got us home, like emergency passport, which was really wild because I won't tell too much of it, just really crazy. Like they thought they almost didn't let Katie back into Canada because the embassy had screwed up her flight. And at the airport at like 5 a.m., she was like, "You can't leave me here." And the embassy was like, "No, you have to. Like, you have to go. Like, we'll issue you her new flight." And she was like, "You can't." And I was like, "I have to." So that was a really bad moment. And
Hmm.
then we went into America because we had to go through America to get home. They interrogated us because they thought that they were like, "Why would you have emergency passports? Why is your country trying to get you home?" So then they thought that we were like drug smugglers or that we were traffickers. And so that was really scary being in America with these emergency passports and having nothing.
Hmm.
And just living like that was pretty crazy too. So just the ride home was like wild, and just being in a country, the hijacking itself was crazy. Um, the whole experience was really, really wild. And I remember just like coming home, and like the first thing I saw when they got on the bus was like people were screaming.
Hmm.
And I had my headphones in because I was actually watching The Bucket List.
Oh.
And I was mindlessly playing Plants vs. Zombies on my iPad or iPod.
Right.
And I looked over my room, my like travel mate, and she was like looking at the girl she was across from me, and she was looking at the girl in front of me, and she was saying to her, like, "Why are you scared? Why are you scared?" And then she looked at me, and I looked up, and there was people running from the front of the bus to the back, like diving into seats. And then there
Wow.
was these guys with balaclavas and a shotgun. And I was like, "Oh my God, like we're being hijacked." And it was just really crazy. And then like a machine gun and a handgun, like it was wild. So and then it sets in, you're like, "Oh my God, like we're probably not going to make it out of this." And these people had, like, you could just see, like, their eyes were just black, like, they had just, like, and red, like, just on drugs, and felt like
Wow.
they felt soulless, but you know they're not, like, it's
Mm.
also you realize you have this, like, flash realizing that's, like, one of the poorest countries, and they're just fighting for their life, this is the life they know, and there's, like, this empathy that comes over you too, which is pretty crazy. But, afterwards when I got home, it was super emotional getting home, and I was in the grocery store with my dad, and this person raised their broom, like someone who'd worked there, and I went on the ground and started crying, and I was
Mm.
just like my dad was like, it's okay, like, you're safe," and I didn't wanna drive anywhere because I always it was just very traumatizing, lots of PTSD, so um, tons of trauma with that, but again, like, these are the events in my life that have made me who I am and see life in a different way, so, not to say I'm like, "Wow, what a grateful moment to be in that spot at that time," but I definitely look at it with, like, this perspective that it's made me and shaped me into who I am today.
Wow. That is insane.
Yeah, it's
So
wild.
so what happened that got them off the bus?
This guy you know what? I don't know exactly what had happened, but this guy at the back of the bus, like, was digging into his bag, and he wanted his passport, they thought he wanted a gun that he was grabbing a gun, some stuff happened, and then they were like, "Vamoose," and got off the bus, and so it was just wild, like, whatever well, long story short, like, the embassy said, like, we didn't try to fight them or, like, put up a fight, so that probably saved our lives too.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's just a really crazy experience. I remember I was telling my therapist this after I came home. She's like, "You should write a book." I was like, "No, that's not what I want to do with this story." But the full length story is pretty crazy. But that's the coolest notes of it.
Wow. That is crazy.
Yeah, it was wild.
Yeah. Why wouldn't you wanna write a book about it? Just curious.
Um, I mean, a couple things. Like, I don't feel like for that I don't want to one like deter people from traveling. I think traveling is like really beautiful and wonderful experience. And I
Mm,
don't regret going. And I think that like everybody lived on in our case, and I just think these countries really need tourism.
mm,
I hope that they're safer than they were then, and I wouldn't want to deter people from going. Do I think that it could happen to anyone? Yes, for sure. But if you just go to Central South America and you stay in the city that you're going to, you're pretty safe. Not to say that we were being completely unsafe, but there is some aspect of that. Like the Canadian ambassador had said, like, you there was no travel warnings at the time,
wow.
and we didn't. Not only did we not look at, we didn't even look at them. I mean,
Mm,
how many times when people are going to a place do they actually see like, is there a no travel ban here because of whether it's terrorism or murder or whatever it may be? So
mm,
that's kind of on us, but, there it is dangerous to go there. It was at our own risk, right? So, um, the cartel makes their way down to Colombia, and these types of things happen, and I think we were young and naive, and it's, a crazy story that I definitely don't mind telling or talking about, but I wouldn't wanna deter anyone from traveling. I think traveling is
yeah.
a beautiful part of life.
Yeah, I understand that. Yeah, and agreed. I miss traveling a lot.
Me too.
Um, yeah, it's like what, Mark Twain said about traveling is that it's, when you travel I'm gonna butcher this, but
Yeah.
he said that traveling is so good because it basically gives you perspective, and perspective is
Yeah.
fatal to prejudice.
Yes.
And it's
Very
so true because when you travel and you go around the world and stuff like that, and you realize, for one, depending which country you're in, how good you have it. Um, depending what country you're in, how some things need to improve.
Yeah, for sure. It's just interesting to me because I was reading this quote the other day about like how you should get to know people that you wouldn't necessarily get to know and who are different than you and have different opposing views. And I think that's really important to have friends in your life that see the world differently. I have friends that, see the world very differently than me. And I respect them and love them, even though we have very differing views. And I think that's super important. And that's kind of what traveling is too, right? Giving
Mm.
you a step into someone else's life. And so it's really important to not have friends and fill your life with people that see the world the same as you and think the same as you and that are echo chambers. You want people that challenge you and your ideas and the way you see things and welcome it.
It's so true. Absolutely true. Um, the last couple of guys that I had on for the podcast, they're atheists and they knew I was religious. So we had some good conversations. But it was so nice to have the conversation without them saying I'm wrong or me saying they're wrong, right?
Yeah.
Because I take what they say, I absorb it, I'm all over it. I watch the podcast after to kind of look into it a bit more, because it's so true. Because it doesn't matter what camp you're in. Let's say you're an atheist, you don't want to just be surrounded by atheists. You want to be surrounded by people who do challenge you and have religious
Yeah.
people around. And same on my side, I don't want to just have a bunch of religious people around me, because then you're not really challenging yourself. And so I like having people on with different viewpoints in mine. And like just like you said, it's so impactful, and it's
It
so
is.
good to be able to absorb that and know where you stand, because otherwise you don't really.
Yeah. And that's just it too. It's like it's not easy. If it was easy to have people with opposing views, everyone would do it because they challenge you. Like my friend right now is challenging me about. I don't want to get too much into this, but I'm voting liberal this year openly because and I'm not like a huge Trudy fan, so it's not about that. I've got my qualms with him, but they want to push affordable housing and affordable childcare for people, and second stage funding for women and children fleeing domestic violence. And I think those things are really important to me. And NDP too. I'm a fan, but she doesn't she hates liberals, right?
Mhm.
Or the liberal government. And I'm totally open to hearing her and I want to hear her. And I'm not, she's a huge NDP person. Um, and I think it's good for us to have those debates and talk and not come from a place of anger, but understand and see where the other person is coming from. And
Mm.
that's just like one scenario, but I think it's really important for us to broaden our views and step outside of ourselves, and it equips us to deal with things. Even this podcast and talking to someone else who sees things a little bit differently than you can take a little piece of that, and it enables you to build, character, um, and yeah, perspective.
Yeah, it's so true.
Mhm.
Yeah, not to get too much into politics, but I'm saving my vote to the very last minute because I don't know who to vote for.
Yeah, that's like they call that strategic voting. And, that's she was kind of bashing that too, but, yeah, because I was strategically voting for liberals because of and I believe in the things that they stand for, but I just don't
Mhm.
know. Yeah, I see where you're coming from, my friend, and that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's tough because I'm in a weird mix because I'm pretty center. There's some things I lead slightly right on, and there's some things I lead slightly left on. But for the most part, my politics are pretty center. And it feels like if you go conservative, it's a bit too right for me. If I go liberal, it's a bit too left. So I don't know where to go.
They call
Um,
liberals conservative lights, which I don't
mhm,
like. I think I would probably stand more with NDP if I thought that there was, a really healthy chance for them to have a voice in this province, but
yeah.
anyway.
Do you know much about their affordable childcare?
For NDP?
Uh, or for the liberals, sorry.
Yeah, it's, $10 a day, I believe it is,
Mm,
um, for people who need childcare. I don't know what your income threshold would have to be,
mm,
but I do believe that everyone should have access to, 1, affordable housing, 2, which is, like, a huge need in this province, and then accessible, affordable childcare, safe childcare for your children. That enables parents to be able to, get a job or do whatever they need to do with their life.
mm.
And kids need access to safe childcare too, because when we don't have that and people can't afford that, they end up getting subjected to things that they shouldn't. So I'm really passionate about providing things for kids, like that, and
Mm.
I think that's a big one for me for sure.
Yeah, I agree with that policy, absolutely. I mean, we've been very lucky in our life. Like we live pretty frugally because I was working, my wife was home with the with her daughter, and that's
Yep.
how we wanted it. So we just kind of stayed frugal. Um, but there's a lot of other people who that's just not an option, right?
Mhm.
So we've been fortunate, but I sympathize with people who have been in that situation where you can't have one parent home. Um, so I think that's a
Yes.
good policy. Now, so is the Liberals' plan? Sorry, I don't
Yep,
mean to
go
make you a I don't mean to make you a spokesperson for the Liberals,
ahead. Okay.
but so is their plan for like the child care like they're going to subsidize it then?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Uh, and so what I believe they'll do, I don't know if it's completely fleshed out yet. It wasn't recently announced, but, is one, provide funding to people who are putting childcare in place, um, and subsidize it, but they'll have obviously be like income thresholds so that people who aren't abusing the systems as well, who can
Hmm.
afford childcare. But that's yeah, again, I think that's a really um, important piece of the puzzle in allowing people to thrive in life is having access to childcare if that's what they want to be able to do is to whether whatever it is with their time that children should be able to access healthcare or not healthcare, sorry, childcare.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, and affordable housing, that's another one that's a big one for me is, I think housing is, like, one of the number one things that, obviously could help
Hmm.
homelessness, and rehabilitation of people if they have a safe place to live, that's not in, like, depressed areas, dilapidated areas only. Regina Housing Authority, I think that's one of the issues is, we just put people back into poor situations, and people deserve to be able to access safe, affordable housing. Important.
Yeah, agree with that 100%.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, because I know, like, yeah, yeah, you're friends with Reina. Yeah, like in her area, it's quite interesting because it's very, or not very new, but it's a newer part of the city that they moved into, and
Mhm.
they've got some renter houses there as well.
Yep.
So it's kind of neat to see how they're moving that already, right?
Well,
So
that's what
that it's
Ivana does. We build affordable housing,
hmm,
for people, for folks, and what I like about it is, um, we rental suites, and, they're all brand new, and they're beautiful, and they are the same as our at market rent, and
hmm,
so it's great because if you need access to affordable housing due to your income level, um, you should, in my belief, be able to access the same things that somebody who makes more than you. You shouldn't have to live in like a depressed area. So I think that's really important for our government to continue to support that and not just put them in again to depressed areas, new places with schools, access to amenities like doctors' offices and schools and grocery stores, and just giving people a second shot at life who may need that.
hmm. It's incredible how that's been such a struggle. Like for 300 years, we've been struggling to try and figure out housing.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
Queen Queen Victoria's husband, he kind of started it in England. Again, perspective because he was from Germany, he's coming to England, seeing how the poor state of housing there, so he kind of tried to make some um, changes. But it's just incredible how we really haven't quite figured it out yet. Um,
Yes.
so for Ivana, sorry, I
Yep.
always want to say Ivana. I've been doing
Everyone does. But if you think if they're named after their 2 kids and one's Ava and Juliana,
Hmm, okay.
Ivana. Yeah, so Ava, Ivana, that kinda helps.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I've been
Yeah,
learning Italian lately, so I everything I see, like A's are always ah, and so I always try and revert to that. Yeah, so for Ivana housing, so like when you, I don't know if this is interesting or not, but it's interesting to me.
okay.
So when you have like when you say it's like to market places like suites to rent or houses
Yep.
to rent and all that stuff, do you guys get subsidized from the government for that, or what happens then?
There is some fundings, but there should definitely be more incentives for building. So yes, there's some, but not nearly enough. Um, people, I think, you know, It varies per province on what they do and the funding that is available. And we're fortunate enough to be able to access some of it, but there's definitely not enough incentives for builders to want to build affordable housing. And I think that we would love to see more people using our model. So the more, incentives there are and grants, even if they were to cap them, it's fine. We really just want more. We want people to be inspired to build more affordable housing. And one really cool thing that we do, we have this thing called the Empowerment Fund. So our primary focus is on women and children fleeing domestic violence. And what the
Mm.
Empowerment Fund does is it bridges the gap. So basically in Saskatchewan, if you flee domestic violence, there's like crisis centers. But
Mm.
once you leave the crisis center, if you don't have enough money to get your own place, even at affordable housing, you end up going back a lot of the times, not always, but sometimes, or into other risky situations, and a lot of times with children. And somewhere like Alberta has second stage funding, operating funding. And so they have these houses where people can go after they leave a crisis center, second stage housing, and they're subsidized by the government. In Alberta, they give $31,000 per unit for operating funding. And so that helps, women and children get back on their feet and find places to live, jobs, whatever they may need. Um, and we don't have any second stage funding in Saskatchewan. So we have the Empowerment Fund, which will bridge the gap. If you apply for it and you're approved through our foundation, we will say let's say you had $500 a month and the suite was $800 a month, we would bridge the gap to
Mm.
make sure that ensure that people have safe housing. Now that shouldn't be our job. That should be the government's
Mm.
job.
Yeah.
It isn't. They're not taking responsibility for that. And so that's something that really needs to be a focus. And we believe that the Liberal government that will be one of their focuses. And I know that
Mm.
NDP are talking about that too. So I can't just say just Liberal, but yeah, that's something that that we're really fighting for.
Mm. Well, you're swinging my vote.
Hey, I'm happy to hear that.
I'll have to get a conservative on next and then hear what they say.
Yeah. Hey,
So
I'm
for
differing of opinions, so
you're making me jealous of where you work.
yeah, it's really great. People often ask me like, what would make you want to close your own business to go somewhere else? And for me, it was about the idea that I was doing something that I thought was meaningful and powerful and purposeful at Aiden. And we were, big advocates for oppressed people and for our community. And we did a lot of community work. It was one of the most important aspects of our job outside of like the core product we created. But when I was approached by Jen Nowden from Avana, it was a no-brainer for me because it was a bigger impact to be created. And for me, that's what life's about, is making life better for other people. I think my purpose is to cultivate meaningful relationships. That's what I feel like my purpose is in life. And I could create more of a meaningful impact with Avana than I ever could with Aiden. And so in the end, I would have just kept Aiden for ego. And I didn't want that. I wanted to be able to be somewhere that can really create change. And what Avana is doing, and they're in Regina, Edmonton, Kelowna, building out through Western Canada and beyond. What they're doing is literally changing people's lives. And so it's like what Aiden's impact amplified. And I'm really proud to work for an organization that drives and is purpose led. It isn't. It's purpose first, product second, and
Mm.
that's really important to me.
Yeah, that is inspiring.
Yeah.
I mean, in my job right now, like I work at SGI in property claims,
Yep.
and there is that aspect that I do like, which is helping people, but it at the end of the day, it's a business, and I think this is a problem with a lot of us that work there because there's a lot of I mean, the workload is insane, but I think that there's this lack of purpose about it, right?
Sure.
And I think you could find purpose within it, um, but hearing you talk, it's like, man, I want that. I want to be in something that is, books give me that, of course, but to have a day job like that. I think it's rather profound. And
It's
it's
yeah, and we don't all need that in our life because some people have it in other ways, but, like, I really find there is no, like, work-life balance or just life, and I'm a really inspired person by a lot of things that go on in my personal life and in my life, and I needed that fulfillment at work. But you know what? There is a beauty, I'll say, in a 9 to 5 job where you don't have to think about work outside of work, and you just go and you turn off when you get home, and that's really great, and I think when you work for a purpose company, it just bleeds into things.
mm,
And that's a beautiful part of it. But it's also a part that you have to also accept is like purpose led companies. But the other thing is the part that bleeds is also happiness and joy. And I
mm,
think those parts are really just as valuable as some of the things I get at work bleed into my personal life. And I'm really grateful for that.
right. So for anyone listening to this podcast, what would you be able to tell them for that Ivana needs at this point,
Um, what do we need?
other than voting liberal?
Vote liberal. No, that's I wouldn't I'd say hmm, we need more people to care about equality. We need people to think about what that actually means. And it means so we're an unapologetically feminist company, we say. Um, and feminism people have this like distorted idea that it means that like there should be a matriarch and no, it's about
Mm,
equality. We all deserve to have equality. And we ask people the question just simply, do you believe that people deserve to live in a safe home? A safe, affordable home? If the answer is yes, then you believe in some form of equality. And we ask, I think what we would need from people is just to drive with that and to make choices with that in mind. And um, you know, want that for all people in our community. And it's incredible what a safe home will do for somebody's mental health and for their
mm,
life and their safety. And so in that respect, I think we just want more people to think about equality, living life, a value-based life, um, where you make decisions based on values and purpose rather than just environmental type of decisions. So, yeah, just
mm,
more thinking about equality and making decisions based on wanting equality for others.
that's wonderful. Now, is it like obviously, not obviously, but is there like somewhere that someone can donate if they can't really get involved, but they want to, have something behind it? Is there like the website that they can go to donate or anything?
So, if we have the Avada Foundation, and the people can donate to the foundation. We also have a Help Us, Help Her event, which once a year, we used to pre-COVID host a dinner for women and children fleeing domestic violence, and we would give Christmas gifts to kids. And this is a really incredible experience for them. And you can donate to that. So if you just Google Ivana Foundation or get in touch with Ivana, we can put you in touch with our foundation CEO and who would be willing to take donations. And 100% of the donation goes to the cause.
Mm,
And so, whether that be building second stage housing for our partners at Sophia House or YWCA, or Christmas gifts last year during COVID, we found out there was an extreme need for children to have snowsuits and winter coats, and so we
mm,
bought them and delivered them to the children in need. And so the foundation gives so much back to this community. And if you're thinking about giving, it's a great place to make a donation to.
mm. Perfect. Well, when this goes live, which should be what's the day? So this will be episode 7. So this second Wednesday in October.
Okay.
So at that time, what I'll do is I'll post links, and if you guys have anything coming up, by all means, let me know, and I can post links to anything that's going on as well. So
Well, I appreciate that. I appreciate you asking about that. And I'll definitely share some links with you in an email after this. So thank you very much.
perfect. Awesome. Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, this was a fantastic chat.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. I'm honored. And this is a really cool thing you're doing. And I really hope that lots of people tune in because I think these conversations are really valuable. And I was just thinking, I'll leave it on this too, is on my birthday, I was thinking about a lot about time as we all do as years pass and time moves on and how we spend it. And my big thing was just like, one, I always say that there's not enough time in a day, and there is. I'm trying to have the opposite belief that there's just so much time for us to spend, but I want to be very picky about how I spend it. And yesterday, or was the day before, I was thinking about how in my life, what types of conversations do I have with people?
Mm,
Um, are they about the weather or sports or a TV show I'm watching? Or are they asking questions like this? Are we talking about what are your values? What is your purpose in life? What are your deepest, desires? What do you want to change in the world? Who is the person you want to be? And I thought to myself, I don't really want to have mundane questions or conversations anymore. I want to have more conversations that are inspiring and leave me feeling fulfilled or questioning or with a different perspective. And I think it's scary the first time when you're with someone and you're like, hey, tell me what you think your life's purpose is. And they may feel, on the spot, but you leave that feeling a more profound sense of accomplishment than you would if you asked them about what they watched on TV. So I guess
mm,
I'll leave with that is, think more about the conversations you have, and conversations like this that we had today are really valuable, and,
mm.
they leave you feeling with a different, type of energy than drained for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
That's
thank you so much.
beautiful.
Thanks for
That's
having me.
beautiful. Thank you so much, Tara.
Yeah, have a wonderful
Yeah,
night, and we'll chat soon.
sounds good. You take
Bye-bye.
care. Bye.